Welcome to our second video installment of how to successfully write a literary criticism. Hopefully at this point you've had some success in framing the paper, exactly what you're going to be writing about over the course of the semester, beginning your initial research to find out what made each of these authors tick and what made them noteworthy, and began to get a grasp of what types of references, articles that you plan on using for creating your final paper. Now the next step is creating your annotated bibliography. Now I want to explain the difference between a bibliography and a works cited page. A bibliography includes sources that you have used and are in the process of using to come up with and write a paper. A works cited page includes only those sources that you directly cite in the paper when you submit your final draft at the very end of the process. So there's a slight difference between those. In other words, everything on your annotated bibliography should become a part of your works cited page if you cite all of those sources when you actually write the paper. But just because you've used a source in your research does not mean you can include it in your final 6 sources on your works cited page unless you actually cite that source as a part of the MLA parenthetical documentation process. So let's talk a little bit about this annotated bibliography. Your first step is to hone down your number of sources to 6 to 10 different scholarly sources that provide you a diversity of perspectives on a diversity of different elements and aspects of each of these authors. One of the big traps that you might fall into is trying to use 6 or 5 sources that are virtually identical in their content and analysis of the subject matter of the author. Remember, to write a good research paper, an effective, balanced, and diverse research paper, you want to bring diverse opinions about diverse elements of each of these authors. Remember, one of those 6 minimum sources has to be your dictionary of literary biography. Also remember, this top set of sources that you're using for your annotated bibliography cannot include a website, but you can use electronic databases. It cannot include reference books, but it can include reference books which are specialized to the world of theater or specifically to the author whom you're writing about. So now let's talk specifically about this annotation. An annotated bibliography. Well, bibliography obviously is a list of your sources. An annotation is a 1-paragraph description of the content of that source and how you intend to use it as a part of your research as you're constructing your rough draft in your final paper. So this annotation is a detailed 1-paragraph explanation. Now, it does a couple of things. One, it makes you think early in the process about how you intend to use these different authors. And number 2, it really forces you as a student to make sure that you're reading the source and you're not just pulling sources off of the web, or you're not pulling it off of the stacks of the library and not really carefully studying the material that's in there. So hopefully the process of creating an annotation for this bibliography is going to make you think early about the content and truly make you dig into the material. Now, here's a litmus test for a good annotation and how detailed it should be and if you're on the right track. After you've created your 1-paragraph annotation, your 1-paragraph description, if you could go back and replace the name of your author, Heinrich Ibsen, Bertolt Brecht, Molière, with another one of the authors, and the paragraph still makes sense, you're probably being much too general. Well, you're certainly being much too general in the content of the annotation. Remember, you're going to deal with specific themes and specific theories and innovations that each of these authors constructed, wrote, and embodied in their work. Now, if you're using an explicator, if you're using the microfiche and microfilm, make sure you note that for me. Bonus points will be awarded to students that dig into those unorthodox research tools that students often overlook. And as far as the explicator goes, and remember that's a reference book to help you find the reference book. If you use an explicator, that's not really a source that you're using for content. So if you're using an explicator, remember that should not be a part of the minimum of 6 sources that you're actually using for this paper. But note it so you can be amply rewarded for making sure that you have that you used an explicator as a part of the process. So again, let's summarize. Annotated bibliography. A bibliography includes sources that you use to help you write the paper. A works cited page includes those sources that you only cite directly using parenthetical MLA documentation when you complete and submit your final draft. An annotation is a detailed one-paragraph explanation of the content of the source and how you intend to use it as a part of your research paper. Litmus test, remember, if you can replace your author's name with a different author and it still makes sense, it's almost certainly too general in its construction. And if you're using an explicator, microfiche, microfilm, make sure you note it clearly so you can be appropriately rewarded. The next step will be constructing your general and detailed outlines, which is really laying the blueprint and framework for the house that you're ultimately going to build. Good luck with the process.